Hello, everyone. I'm Rose Gerber, co-host director of Patient Advocacy Education. I know that this time of the year, everybody is extra busy, both in your professional lives and your personal lives. So I'm extra grateful that you are choosing to spend 30 minutes with us today. And you will not regret spending those 30 minutes because you're going to learn some really great information from our incredible guest today. Our special guest is Monica Fawzy Bryant. She is the Chief Operating Officer of an organization called Triage Cancer. I have had long admiration for this organization because they're focused on a very unique aspect of cancer care, and that is legal rights. Triage Cancer is led by a powerful duo of attorneys who are using their skill set to who have become incredible advocates. So today we're going to learn a lot about legal issues surrounding the cancer diagnosis. And I know in complete honesty, that's something that I never thought about when I was diagnosed. And I don't know how many other cancer survivors did as well. So it's one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. But today, Monica is going to tell us and teach us about issues that we may have never thought about, and hopefully that none of us have to encounter. But if we do have to encounter that personally or through a family member who may have been diagnosed, Monica is going to give us the tools and the knowledge to know how to respond to that. Monica, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your skill set with us. Welcome, Monica.
So if you could just go back to the beginning of the presentation, it looks like we've got some gremlins today, as happens in these lovely virtual programs. Rose, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I had to chuckle a little bit because we often say you don't know what you don't know, and it is never more true than when it comes to cancer-related legal issues. So I'm absolutely honored and delighted to be here today to talk to you a little bit about what's legal about cancer. As Rose mentioned, Triage Cancer, if we go to the next slide, please. Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit that's dedicated to providing education on the legal and practical issues that can impact both the individuals who are diagnosed, but also their caregivers. And as you can see from this graphic, those legal and practical issues really run the gamut, from health insurance options to how do you navigate those plans once you have them, to employment and estate planning and disability insurance. And so sometimes I even say, you know, we talk about all the things that don't get talked about in the doctor's office, but that you may have questions about. Next slide, please. And a common term that is thrown around a lot in the cancer community is financial toxicity. And financial toxicity was really coined by researchers out of Duke University. And in their research, they compared the out-of-pocket expenses that individuals incur once they've had a cancer diagnosis to the physical toxicity and burden that many cancer treatments can cause. And that's where we got this financial toxicity term. But what was really important, in my opinion, about this research was they didn't just focus on how there was a financial burden in an acute way during active treatment, but how there's potentially a long-term impact that people face. And it's not always just the person who's diagnosed, that the changes caregivers may experience could sort of contribute to that problem of financial toxicity. So here we are, you know, we have this term that was coined in 2013. We're still talking about it at almost every cancer event that I go to. So why are we still talking about it 10 years later? At Triage Cancer, we think the reason is, go to the next slide, please. We think it's because there are multiple contributing factors to financial toxicity. And if we aren't, as a healthcare community, addressing all or at least most of the contributing factors to financial toxicity, we're never going to be able to solve this problem. And many times when people are talking about financial toxicity, they're really focused on the cost of care. But at the end of the day, that's not actually an accurate identifier of if someone's going to experience financial toxicity or not. Certainly, it's an issue that we need to address, but that's sort of a bigger global issue that we might need to tackle at some point. At Triage Cancer, we actually think there's some easier contributing factors that we can tackle. And those include health insurance status. Now, sometimes this means for people not having health insurance at all. But more often, what we see at Triage Cancer and what we've seen for over a decade is that it's about not having adequate health insurance or the right health insurance for them. Or sometimes it's about having maybe fine health insurance, but not understanding how to navigate or use those health insurance plans. And so at Triage Cancer, we spend a lot of time talking about health insurance options, how to pick the right plan for you, and then how do you actually use that plan? We often say, there should be a class in high school on health insurance and finances, because they're all things that we need to be able to navigate and tackle once we become adults. But how are we ever taught how to do that? I don't know your experience, Rose, but I know it wasn't until I, had to start using my health insurance and start going to the doctor that I really figured out, wow, I don't understand how any of this works.
Right. And going back in time, I think when people first encounter their health insurance, you're shocked with your copay. Maybe you get health insurance with your first job, you're in your 20s, you're like, what? I got to pay $30. $30 is a lot of money. But we don't understand how, and you're going to teach us today how that number gets larger and larger because it's beyond just a copay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is so true for many of us, right? We maybe have insurance through our parents, and then we age out, or we get our first job and we get insurance then, and it's sort of like, okay, well, I'll take this plan because how am I supposed to make choices? And so, we spend a lot of time at Triage Cancer teaching people how to make those choices, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And I also just want to mention here, if anyone who's on today has questions for me, I would be delighted to try and answer them. So just go ahead and throw them in the chat box. And Rose, I can't actually see the chat box at the moment. So if some things pop up towards the end, we can certainly address them.
Okay, great. We will do that.
Fantastic. So while I think that health insurance status and the ability to use your plan is the number one most significant contributing factor to financial toxicity, the second sort of most significant factor is somebody's employment changes. And again, this could be about the person who's been diagnosed. It could also be for the caregivers who experience employment changes due to their role as a caregiver. So if there is a spouse that now needs to take time off to care for, their loved one, how is that going to impact their employment and their overall family's financial health? Certainly having access to things like disability insurance could be a significant difference for if somebody is going to experience financial toxicity or not. And then the reality is all the things that normally happen over the course of our lives that can cause a financial impact continue to happen even after a cancer diagnosis.
Yes, that's very true.
Right? We don't get a pause button on life.
Right, exactly.
All the other things, so relationship changes or moving or graduating from school, all of those things are going to impact your finances, and they just start to compound the financial burden that someone might be feeling. Next slide, please. So when we talk about these issues, we often ask people if they've ever put together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Especially since COVID, we get some hands in the audience like, yeah, I started puzzling. And then we ask, well, have you ever tried to do that without seeing the picture on the box?
Oh, wow. That's a great analogy.
It gets much harder when you don't actually know what the picture is.
Wow, that's good.
And that's how it can feel to a lot of people after they experience a cancer diagnosis. They don't know what the picture's supposed to look like, and they may not even understand or be able to identify the different puzzle pieces. And so when we do trainings, we really try to give people those individual puzzle pieces. Next slide, please. And when we talk about puzzle pieces, we're talking about the federal laws and programs they might have access to. Maybe they have different rights or programs based on the states that they're living in. Maybe they have different policies or benefits they have access to because their employer provides something above and beyond what the law requires. And that's true for a lot of people. So something like sick time, for example, in most states, if you have access to paid sick time, that's because an employer is offering that to you, not because it's necessarily required by law in many states. So looking at what your specific employer is providing you is an important piece of the overall puzzle. And then also looking at what types of insurance coverage does somebody have. And when we talk about cancer, people automatically jump to health insurance, which of course is an important part of the conversation, but also things like disability insurance and life insurance, supplemental insurance, long-term care insurance. All of those types of insurance could be puzzle pieces that someone has that's going to change their overall picture. And then, of course, they may have access to financial assistance programs or other types of assistance programs. And so we teach people about all the details in each of these categories and figure out what their puzzle pieces are so that they can figure out what their overall picture looks like, because no two people's picture is going to be exactly the same.
Very interesting. Next
slide, please. So, the title of the presentation was What's Legal About Cancer? And certainly some of the obvious ones are, health insurance is rooted in the law, employment rights are often rooted in the law. But what many people are surprised to find out is my answer to this is almost everything. Can we get one more click, please? And this is just a snapshot of the various legal issues that we help people with at Triage Cancer. And so almost everything we talk about is really rooted in access to care. So if someone doesn't have access to job protected time off, maybe they're not actually accessing the screenings that they're supposed to be getting. Or maybe they're not able to complete their full course of treatment, because if they take any more time off, they're going to lose their job. And if they lose their job, they're going to lose their housing. And there starts to be a domino effect. And so even something like talking about access to care is a legal issue. Certainly, government benefits and education rights. We spend a lot of time talking about estate planning and medical decision making and trying to dispel the myth that those are end of life discussions, because really, in my opinion, everyone over the age of 18 should have certain estate planning documents in place, whether there's a cancer diagnosis or not.
Oh, absolutely. I think you should repeat that. It's so important.
I'm glad you agree with me. I really do think, it's such a shame, because we know that 68% of all Americans don't even have a will, which is the most basic document in estate planning. And there are free and low cost options to create these documents. And so it's about normalizing the conversation and although it can be challenging, taking some of the emotion out of the conversation, because ultimately we are talking about somebody's death at some point.
Right.
But I often say, what is true for every single one of us? And I can say this unequivocally, at some point, we are all going to die.
Right.
And certainly we hope that is way off in the future after we've lived long and fulfilling lives, but it is a reality for us at this moment in time that at some point we're going to pass away. And those people that take the time and the initiative to create their estate plans are really doing a very loving thing for their friends and families. And not
I think that's
all
really
of those
powerful. I'm sorry, I was excited to share this with you. It's what you're saying is very powerful, because obviously working in oncology, I'm exposed more than most people might be to losing, people that were friends or colleagues to cancer. And it can be any type of illness, and whatever that disease is, when that person passes, whether it's a sudden death or a known death, there's so much devastation just around that moment. And then now to complicate it with like estate planning just adds to the grief. So what you're suggesting is so important, Monica.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It It is something I think, working in this line of work, we do talk about it a lot. And I think it's really valuable for advocates that are listening, for healthcare professionals that are on today, to be talking about it more and make it more part of a normal conversation to be having, and not to shy away from having the conversation. I will just say right now, because I don't want to forget later, that at Triage Cancer, we have many estate planning resources for people to learn more, but one of them is an estate planning toolkit. And it comes in 3 different parts. So the first part is very general information about the various documents and why someone might create those documents. And then part 2 is state-specific information. So every state has specific rules about how to create documents. So maybe in one state, you need 2 witnesses, in another state, you need it to be notarized. So it can be a little tricky to figure out what your state's rules are. And so we've laid all of that out for you. And then in part 3, there are forms. So if your state has a fill in the blank will, we have pulled that in. So there's one place for you to go to find all of that information for your state. And that's available for free on our website for downloadable purposes. And we have them for all 50 states.
She said free.
I did. I said free. In fact, everything that Triage Cancer provides, we provide free of charge. Next slide, please. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about our resources, and then we can certainly open it up to questions, because there's so much information that we provide that there's no way I could cover it all in 30 minutes. We want you to be aware so that Triage Cancer, in addition to COA, can continue to be resources for you all moving forward. So we have a monthly webinar series. They are about 90 minutes long. Anyone is welcome to attend. We even get people outside of the cancer community, so literally anyone is welcome to attend. But we do provide continuing education for free for nurses, social workers, and patient advocates. So that's a little bit of an added bonus to come spend 90 minutes with us if you are a healthcare professional. And we just released our 2023 schedule and registration. So that is up and live for you to take a look at and start planning. Next slide, please. We also have 2 day-long events where we talk about some of the most common topics like health insurance and employment and finances. Both of them will be online next year, so you can plug in from anywhere around the country. And again, we do provide CEs, and our dates have been released for 2023 as well. We welcome anyone to attend this. So caregivers, individuals who've been diagnosed, regardless of where you are on the continuum of care. So we often talk to people who are long outside of active treatment, but still have questions about employment or health insurance. And so you're certainly welcome as well. Next slide, please. Then we have a training specifically for healthcare professionals and advocates. And this is a more in-depth training specifically around insurance and finances. And so it's an interactive day. Even when we deal with them online, we find ways to try to make them very interactive. We get questions all day long that we answer. And we do a deep dive into health insurance, finances, and disability insurance. So we will be releasing our 2023 dates probably in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. Now, at Triage Cancer, and we can get one more click, please, Nick. At Triage Cancer, we have a number of, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Go back one. Sorry that you have to drive for me. I appreciate your assistance here. But at Triage Cancer, we provide this education in a number of ways because we know that people learn in different ways and people's capacities at any given moment could be different. So, you know, if someone's just been diagnosed, they could feel flooded with information, and maybe reading, you know, a 20-page guide is just more than they can handle at the moment. Or maybe it's like, I don't really know if I, you know, need information about this. So I'm just going to read a quick 1 to 2 page document to then figure out if I need to learn more. And so we present the information in multiple formats. And one of those formats is our quick guides and checklists. So these are 1 to 4 page documents that kind of give an overview of a particular topic. They can all be viewed online. They can be downloaded and printed, but then healthcare professionals can also order bulk hard copies, and we will ship them to you around the country for free. So if you're running a support group or you're going to a local health fair and you think people would be interested in this, feel free to just fill out the form on our website and we will send you those materials. Next slide.
Monica, excuse me, if we could stay on the side for a second. Thank you, Nick. For the benefit of our audience, on the column titled Quick Guides, you have a couple of bullet points where you're using acronyms. Can you explain to the audience what some of those are, please?
Of course. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is the ADA, and that is a seminal law in our country to protect individuals with disabilities. And it protects people with disabilities in a number of areas. So many people are familiar with the ADA because of ramps into buildings or parking spots closer to stores. But the ADA did some really important things in the arenas of employment and housing and school. And so we have sort of baseline information about that. The FMLA is the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is the seminal federal law that allows eligible individuals to take job protected time off from work. So there's a lot of nuances and details that are important to understand about the FMLA to use it effectively. And so we have a sort of quick version of that, and then we have a more expanded version that does more of a deeper dive. I think another one that's pretty common that people confuse is SSI and SSDI. So those are the two federal long-term disability insurance programs that are run through the Social Security Administration. And again, there's some pretty important distinctions between the two and who gets to benefit from those programs. So that quick guide sort of lays out the differences between the two programs and then points people to more information if they think that they're eligible for one or both of those programs.
So Monica, if I'm, a cancer patient, newly diagnosed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I would think that one of the most basic questions that would be asked are what are my rights as a cancer patient? And I'm employed. Do I have to come back to work after I have my chemo appointment in the morning? Can I take a leave of absence? And I do understand, because you shared this earlier, that there's different laws by states, but can you give our audience some insight into what the most basic request is? Because I would imagine, or maybe let me ask you, is that a common question that you would get? I would think that would be a starter question for most people.
We certainly get questions around employment and ability to take time off on a pretty regular basis. And the answer is almost always, it depends. So to be able to answer that question, I'm going to come back with a whole lot of questions like, how big is your employer and what state do you live in and how long have you worked there? Because all of those details are going to help us identify which laws you might have access to. And so even for someone who, even for neighbors who maybe work at the same company, the answer could be different depending on how long they've worked at that company.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so Nick, can you go another slide or two? Because I want to actually talk quickly about one more, please. I'm sorry. So we have, if someone is just starting off and trying to understand all of these different pieces, I would almost recommend starting with our animated video series, because these are 5-minute long videos. They're available in English and Spanish, and they give the sort of highest level overview of different pieces. And so I think they're a really helpful place to start so that people don't get overwhelmed.
Right.
And then certainly, once they watch this video, if there's a particular topic they want to learn more about, they could go to a quick guide or they could go to our longer guides to read more. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. One more, Nick. Thank you. So 2 more things I just wanted to quickly mention before we open it up is we have an educational blog on our website, and this is where we try to share any late-breaking news that's come out around cancer-related legal issues. So an example of that, next slide, please, is a few months ago now, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed out of DC. And people may have heard about this in the news, and they may have heard about something like, oh, it's lowering drug costs, which is so incredibly vague and doesn't really explain to the average person, what is this law going to do and how is this going to be helpful? And so in our blog, we break down in plain language why this piece of legislation or this law is beneficial to the cancer community. So this is just an example of what you can find on our blog, so that you don't have to read all the things that Rose and I spend time reading to understand sort of what's going on, because most people have lives to live and they don't have time to do that. Next slide, please, Nick. Now, even with all the resources that we provide at Triage Cancer, there still may be questions. And so we have created a legal and financial navigation program. And this is an opportunity for someone who's been diagnosed, again, anywhere along the continuum of care. You don't have to be in active treatment. It's really anyone. Caregivers or healthcare professionals can reach out to us by filling out a form on our website, letting us know what their question is, and then we schedule a call with them. And we get on the phone with them and we hear what's going on with them, and then we answer the question. So on that call, we try to explain somebody's options. So we, do you have access to the FMLA based on your situation? We provide accurate information, because unfortunately, there's a lot of someone in my support group told me this.
Oh, right.
Which is all well-intentioned, but may or may not be true.
Right.
And then we give people the next steps to take so that they can be effective self-advocates. And so this program, again, is available to anyone across the country. It's totally free. You just have to fill out the website form and then be on the lookout for an email to schedule a call with us. Next slide, Nick. And this is just a quick example of the stories we hear. So Jake's a professor at BYU. He's just been offered a job of a lifetime at the University of Florida. But his daughter has lymphoma and is on a $25,000 a month drug.
Wow.
The problem is the new jobs insurance doesn't cover that drug.
Wow.
And so now Jake's in a situation where he might not take his dream job because he needs to make sure that his daughter has access to this drug. So Jake reaches out to us and we are able to very quickly explain to him, well, listen, here are the three options, here are the pros and cons to the various options. And here's, this one could be more cost effective than this one. And it turns out in this real life story that Jake was able to take his dream job and his daughter was able to access her medications. And last I heard, she's doing very, very well.
That's incredible. I've got to say that I'm sure I'm not alone in saying this, that anyone who sees Cobra can maybe have a personal story with it as well. Because I remember in my 20s when I changed jobs and I had to, use Cobra, and it was so expensive, especially when you're in your 20s. So to know that you were able to help out this family, it's like there's all these success stories in there. The dad got his job, Sarah's doing well. And it's a reminder too how incredibly expensive medication is. It really is. So I think, again, the work you're doing is incredible.
Well, thank you so much. And Nick, if you just want to go 2 more slides, this is our contact information. 1 more, please. So if anyone who's listening wants to continue a relationship with Triage Cancer, these are just some of the ways that you can do that. And I want to be conscientious of time, but I'm also happy to stay on and answer any questions if there are any. And just say thank you again, Rose, for inviting us to talk with you all.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not seeing any questions on my end. Or Nick, are you seeing anything on the back end?
No questions right now.
I'm sure they were writing notes or taking pictures, screenshots. This has been very interesting. I learned a lot, and just want to remind our audience that this will be available on COA's website. We're here to answer questions, and we can also direct you to Monica again. Thank you again. I think it's really incredible what you've done using your legal knowledge to help out cancer patients, and again, teach us what we don't know. So thank you very much. And I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday season and join us back in 2023 on January 11th where we're going to have Ted Ocon, our executive director, and Nick Ferreros, our managing director for community oncology, tell us what's up ahead in 2023. And it's also going to be, believe it or not, the third year of our advocacy chats. And we're so glad that you are a very, very important part of these advocacy chats. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.